land and the American dream is really fitting, I think, for the work that Del Val does in educating students, but also in the issues that folks are discussing today in culture and society. So I'm Lynn Carroll. I'm the Alumni Director here at Del Val. In a past life, I worked with a nonprofit called the Nature Conservancy. And our work in the Nature Conservancy was primarily conservation, but also education was a big part of it. And in my efforts at educating as I became a parent, it has been a whole new lens through which to look at education, because I see the importance of having young people understand what the natural world has to offer them and why it's important to protect it. So we'll talk about that a bit today. I'd like to introduce our two panelists. And Rebecca and Paul will be, I think, each giving a presentation about their work and their areas of expertise. But then I'd like to make sure that people have ample time for questions and we can have an open discussion with Rebecca and Paul and cover their topics, but any other topics that you guys are interested in as well. Rebecca, would you kindly introduce yourself first?
So while we get things booted up, let me introduce myself. I'm Rebecca Culler. I'm with the Wildlife Habitat Council, and I'm the manager of, sorry, this is a brand new title as of last week, manager of conservation content and partnerships. And my past role is as an education specialist. So that's really where I'm coming from today with the education background. For those of you who don't know who the Wildlife Habitat Council is, I'd be surprised if you did know who we are. We work primarily with corporations. Generally, what we do is work with our membership to set aside land for conservation purposes. Whether it's we don't do easements as much. What we do is we help them use land that is already being used for something else to also benefit wildlife. We help go to physical on-the-ground sites. We help them realize what they've got there and what the potential is. Help them to decide what they would like to enhance for, whether it's pollinators or maybe a removal of invasive species, things like that. And then also to help them use that habitat area as an area for environmental education. If you hear me say conservation education, environmental education, EE, I use those terms pretty much interchangeably. I know that there are different nuances to each one. Depends on who I'm talking to, which one I use, so if I slip up, that's why. So Wildlife Habitat Council is made up of not only the corporations that we serve, but also conservation organizations, nonprofits, trade associations, and wildlife conservation organizations. Groups like Ducks Unlimited, the National Wild Turkey Federation, the Pollinator Partnership, all of these groups work with us to work on this extra property. Our primary mission is to promote and certify habitat conservation and management of corporate lands through partnerships and education. And the reason I have to read that is because that's also brand new. So we operate in 13 countries, including the US, and we have over 800 certified programs, both with education and wildlife habitat management. So that's a little bit of who we are. I really like this photo because it shows exactly who we are. We talk about management, we talk about education, and you can see that is an oil refinery in the background.
I don't think we can see it.
Yes.
It's loaded. Yeah.
There it comes. There it is.
All right.
Look at that. Yeah, let's turn this down a little bit. Oh, you got it.
I'm good.
Thank you. Awesome. So I really love this photo. This is, I think, just really typical of what we do and why I'm proud to work for WHC. So this whole symposium really is about using land sustainably. So the direction I wanted to take you in today is to discuss three main things here on the board. Why environmental education is beneficial. I actually once had somebody ask me, is environmental education education or is it indoctrination? And that question really bothered me, and it's bothered me for years. So I like to explain why it is actually education. Second, going to talk to you about using private land. Yesterday in one of the sessions, somebody asked about what could be done to help whatever the situation was. I think we were talking about barn owl conservation. What could be done to help? And so I want to give you a couple ideas on that front, and then ideally, throughout the talk, you'll understand that conservation without education is not actually completely conservation. So briefly, what is environmental ed? It's using the environment as the living classroom or the integrated context. It allows you to explore any topic more deeply, and it allows for problem solving, immersive experiences, and hands-on, minds-on learning on the part of the student. And when I say student, I mean any audience, any age group, any person, anybody who can learn better outside. Conservation education is good for everybody. That's basically the point here. And so this is a graphic that's used a lot to define education and the different levels of engagement with students. On the bottom left is that gateway experience into the topic. Basically, this is a great way to get people interested in what's outside, getting them hooked. On the top right is the really immersive experience. You've got relevance, you've got rigor. That means that the students are using the environment as the laboratory. They gain the factual knowledge, what you actually want them to take home, but they also learn how to apply that information and further how to adapt that information once they've got it so that they can further problem solve on their own. Ideally then becoming stewards of the planet. So education programs are based in habitats engage learners more deeply, and I know I've said that already, than classroom-based programs. They contribute to more thorough understanding, the building of greater conservation ethic, and the development of critical thinking and hands-on skills. These qualities in turn lead to a more engaged citizenry and a better prepared workforce and the increased care of our global natural environment. By going outside to learn, the students gain the opportunity to make the entire world their laboratory, and the natural environment provides many concrete examples in space to explore. So just a few minutes, I would like to talk about the ways that environmental ed benefits different groups. The first group that I wanted to start with is the most obvious, is students. Those who learn outside lean that conservation message that you're trying to get across, whatever it is, whether it's about barn owls or recycling or saving water. Of course they learn that, but they also learn better. So they take both the application and the specific lessons with them when they leave you. Studies show that environmental education improves achievement in core subject areas and also makes students more interested in learning overall. It gives them that hook. Direct involvement in conservation actions provides an immediate confidence that students can make things better, that they're not powerless. And if anybody, I highly recommend the book about ecophobia by David Sobel. I believe it's called Combating Ecophobia. Excellent book, and it's all about how to stop children from being afraid of what's going wrong on the planet, and empowers them to make a difference. So actually taking part and being hands-on in environmental education helps with this. Students better understand sense of place. We just heard about sense of place in the Badger-2 medicine. They understand an area's natural history and how it informs human history. And then on the college level, students who participate in outdoor fieldwork and research are critical to academic success because they learn to apply concepts in a real-world setting and because it improves process skills such as observation and interpretation, which are important further from that. So up until a major urbanization, American children grew up surrounded by open space. This allowed them to learn on their own, learn concrete lessons, gain their own experiences, and then learn to apply skills like teamwork and leadership. Obviously now we have less of this, and studies are starting to bring us back to that ethic, trying to tell people, look, this is the way it was for a reason. It's a good way to learn. So send your kids outside. Fieldwork helps to clarify ecological concepts, develops favorable attitudes, allows students to problem solve, all of these things. According to the National Service Learning Clearinghouse, learning rooted in the context of community and outdoors provides meaningful context for orienting individuals and society to nature. So talking about the at-risk group, in 2003, the journal Critical Social Work published an article that explored reasons why nature immersion programs for at-risk youth really weren't as successful. And this is because they were taking students from urban areas completely out of their element into a pristine area. And when the kids got home, they weren't able to make meaning of how the natural area correlated to their urban area. And so they lost a lot of the lessons that they could have really gained from the pristine area. With student achievement in the national spotlight, special interest is on schools in urban areas. Social justice is becoming more of an issue. African American and Latino students are on average 3 grade levels behind other students, and low-income communities have 7 times less graduation rates. We can combat this with environmental education because it gives the process skills. It gives students a chance to become leaders in their community, to care about other people in their area, to care about their environment, and to care about what's going on and become actual civic leaders as well as graduates. The State Education and Environmental Roundtable suggests that environmental education can close the achievement gap a bunch of different ways, and we talked about this yesterday in one of the panels. Better discipline, better classroom management, because kids who get to run around burn off some of that energy. Kids who get to learn outside are more engaged and more focused. There's better scores on tests and increased engagement. Let's talk a little bit about science literacy. So this graphic just talks a little bit about the way students leave the STEM fields as they age through the system. In 1995, the TIMSS test provided the first wake-up call. We were doing really badly at keeping people in STEM. In 4th grade, we were about par with everybody else. By the end of 8th grade, STEM performance plummeted, and then by 12th grade, we were the last in world rankings for STEM education. President Obama in 2009 launched the Educate to Innovate initiative to move American students from the middle to the top of the pack. And so we're starting to really think about STEM more inclusively. In order to attract more and to keep more students and to keep more diverse students, environmental education is a great way to do it. It's because it's engaging, it's interesting, and it gives real-world models, real-world examples of why, of how to act in the environment. So environmental education really addresses science literacy. Now, I told you guys that I work with companies, and I'm going to expound on that a little bit, but I want to say what the benefits are to companies. Now, please bear with me, because I know not everybody's keen, but a company at the site level in a small town in middle America can gain benefits from doing biodiversity and environmental education work. If they do it correctly, they can see measurable increases in conservation goals, on business goals, including permitting, agency relations, and then also within the community, they see increased customer relations. They see a social license to operate increase. And what I just discussed, talking about STEM folks staying in the community and growing up to work in their community where they grew up. At the corporate level, companies see improved global reputation impact. They see integrated recognition, and they see robust reporting as benefits to all of these environmental ed aspects. From teaching employees to implement and monitor conservation projects to involving the community in citizen science and using the environment as a living laboratory for research, environmental education engages the community, and companies realize this. From that standpoint, here's where I'm gonna maybe just get on my soapbox a little bit. We're gonna talk about the employees. So, there's always increased engagement, increased empowerment, whether you're teaching environmental ed or whether you're on the receiving end and learning on the environmental ed spectrum. You're engaged and you're empowered and you make better decisions regarding the environment. There's literal development. Who here wants professional development at work? Everybody. And this is a great way to get through that. It's not just anecdotal either. I mean, I've heard a million stories, miners and landfill owners and all these people who work these sites, chemical engineers, who say that this is the best part of their day. Going out, working with kids, taking kids outside, that this is the best part of their day. That's not just anecdotal. We also have the numbers to back that up. Companies who provide environmental education opportunities keep their people longer because there's higher job satisfaction. I talked yesterday with one of you about the paradox of corporations being people, and this is what I said about the soapbox a little bit. I personally disagree with the Supreme Court ruling. I'm sure a lot of you guys do. My company officially has no position on that, so take what I'm saying right now outside of Wildlife Habitat Council, but a company may or may not be a person, however you look at it. But every single company exists because of people, and I'm on the side of the people who work. So a company is only as strong as the individuals on the ground. When you go to these sites and when you talk with these people working at the largest employer, maybe in their town or in their state or in their region, folks are happy to have a good job. They're maintaining their families, they're comfortable, they're able to put money away for retirement. This is all economics truth. When you get to these sites, these people are doing this for their kids, for their families, for the schools in their regions. I just want you guys to remember that even though companies are not people, no matter what the Supreme Court says, they are made up of people. So that's my pitch. Benefits to the nation. The reason I say that there are benefits to the nation is an amalgam of all of the other benefits. It encourages students, they demonstrate increased enthusiasm and commitment to careers where the employer actually demonstrates an interest in the environment and environmental education. Over time, educating youth in this way bolsters the economy and sustainability of local businesses. These students are more conscientious of green issues, and they're willing to make the choices that are more green. As they enter the workforce, they then go on to inform and engage others in the same in those same causes. Greater scientific literacy also improves the well-being of our communities because better informed citizens make better choices in resource use and environmental impact. I mean, that's why we're all here today, because we want to be better informed. So I keep mentioning things that I learned yesterday, and I have to admit I went home last night and redid a bunch of this presentation because of things that I heard yesterday, and I've gotten such good feedback from folks. We chatted about how we won't make a difference in our economy as a nation or change how the nation works with regard to shared land use and individual conservation ethics without the young, upcoming generation that believes in the environment. Education is crucial for any conservation initiative, and this is part of what I was talking about, being really informed and important to the science world. We advance scientific research goals when we use citizen science like pollinator, through NAPSI, doing Monarch Watch, or things like that, National Phenology Network. All of these areas that have real science allow students to do science as scientists do it. It gives them the chance to really get out there, do the outreach, and learn what it means to contribute to a larger data set that informs real science. Telling any student that, they feel empowered and they feel much more engaged. So, back on the, a little bit back on the bandwagon, why companies? I'm advocating for using, this is what the symposium is about, is talking about using private land, using land in general. How do we make it more sustainable? How do we make a difference? How do we reach a sustainable American dream? I propose working with companies or working with private landowners, and I know they're evil. I get it. I sat at lunch with a couple of people yesterday. Please tell me you don't work with Monsanto. And I was just like, my biggest project right now is with Monsanto. So I know. And the thing is that what we don't regulate, everything is above and beyond regulation. What I am trying to do is convince people on the ground to do the right thing with environmental education. It is my one small step to make things better. Taking it where I can get it. But here's a couple reasons why I do what I do. In the US, 60% of property is privately held. The majority of that is home ownership, but the rest of that is corporately held property. So, with a decline in wildlife habitat and people using all of this property, if they're willing to give some of it back to wildlife conservation and environmental education, I'm all for that. Absolutely. So, let's take it where we can get it. Companies also have a ton of resources. Not necessarily money, but land and people and time. And in case you didn't know, time is the most important thing for education. You need the time in order to make it happen. So, the second truth is that we all use the infrastructure and products that companies provide. Whether we like it or not, we drive on roads, which is petroleum products, mined products. We use toothpaste, which, did you know half of toothpaste is mined? I didn't know that before I started this job. We eat food, which requires agriculture, which requires petroleum. We flush toilets, which means that we have a mining industry and a construction industry. And we send whatever is not compostable or recyclable to a landfill. It's the way it works. So, corporations are also not only providing us with good things that we need, infrastructure, but also they're the ones with jobs. People make money by working for corporations. They pay a higher wage than NGOs, significantly higher. They work for an NGO. And they also provide long-term jobs. If you talk to anybody at GM, they've been there for 30 years. And it's been a solid, good job for them for a long time. So, finally, these companies, as I said, they have people on the ground who really do want to do good things. They have kids. They live in their communities. They have neighbors. They are people. So let's use what we've got. Let's partner, and let's make things work. That's what I'm saying here. So why private property? Can I just get an amen for a little girl using a microscope? By the way, I love this photo. This is what I tried to use this one a lot. I love this one. Why private property? They have resources. I know I just said it, but I'm saying it again. We can take advantage of space that is not otherwise used, or worse, that is used for something negative, that they are overtaken by invasive species or something like that. So private property has its benefits, aside from resources. They're nearby. And I just talked to you guys about the at-risk youth needing spaces that are nearby, that are like what they live in. Something that is better, and something that can teach them something, but something that is like where they live. We can promote conservation and sustainable use through these properties. By making it better and by using environmental education, we're having the students take part in that. It's a huge amount of property. Remember, I said 2/3 of US property is privately owned. Private lands also build corridors. If you take a small piece of your property, and you take a small piece of your property, and you take a small piece of your property, and everybody adds just a little bit of wildlife habitat, or takes their kids outside, everybody's making a small impact into a much larger landscape. From a practical standpoint, you can do whatever you want on private property. Private property. So if you're working with a landowner and they want to run a hunting program and teach kids conservation through hunting, they can do that. They're allowed to do that, making the right partners. So finally, a study by the USDA and NRCS on conservation education found that it was more effective when peers and local trusted partners made connections. In small communities, with a lot of private property, these are the landowners. So how do you do it? Basically, we encourage wildlife habitat enhancement and education programs that go hand in hand. So get kids involved, or anybody involved in conservation education through action. Sorry about that. Every type of audience has a unique set of learning goals. So keeping in mind who your learners are, certainly ask me if you need information on who you would like to reach out to. I would be more than happy to give you some sample learning goals. I would love to talk to you about that. Here are some resources for you. The NAAEE and NEAF, those are both environmental education associations. And then there are curricula listed here, Project Wild, Learning Tree, the Pollinator Protection Campaign curriculum, WILD, Wonders of What Was. This is a really small subset of available curricula, but these curricula are all timed to standards. They're all used with evaluation built in, so it's effective learning. And again, if you have any questions, this is a super small subset. Let me know. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. I would love to, I can even pass this along to you guys if you want. Finally, and my last main point is partnerships are key. Very few environmental education efforts succeed without at least one change agent. As I've demonstrated, I hope private property can and is used for environmental ed and used well. But when that happens, it's because people work together. Somebody in the education world wants some property. Somebody who has the property wants to reach out to the community. It's a partnership. A couple things to remember when you do work with companies in private land, they're not money bags. They have a budget, and the reason they're profitable is because they keep that money. But they do have resources that they're oftentimes very willing to give and wanting to reach out to their community. So make a partnership, not just use them, but make a partnership, and I think everybody is better off for it. The analogy that I use here a lot is when you can't start your car and you get out to push, that one person takes the initiative to get the car started, but then when people see that happening, they run up and they help. People want to help. I believe that, and maybe it's a little Pollyanna-ish, but I really believe that. And then my final point is that conservation without education isn't truly conservation. If you're not out there explaining what you're doing and why, and giving people a chance to respond and take that in, you're not going to finish your conservation message. So I'm hoping that if you guys have questions or anything, please let me know. I will be more than happy. This is my contact information. I actually left my cards out in the car, but if you're patient, I can go get them. Please feel free to reach out. We enjoy discourse and conversation and partnership. And that is my new title, Partnerships. So I'm pretty proud of that. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And
Question?
Yeah.
What area do you cover?
Well,
Rebecca's done, kind of put it in a sort of a big picture perspective, historically, philosophically. And if I could ask you to dim the lights a wee bit, we'll get juicy photos. But this is we're going to talk about Liberty Hyde Bailey. You may know, but you'll know a little bit about him before you leave today. So, land of the American dream. So let's look at the American dream here. What are we dreaming? In our dreams, just to sort of get to know it, Walmart is doing fantastic things. They're interested, these are aspirational goals, in being supplied 100% by renewable energy at some point, creating zero waste and selling only sustainable products. That's their stated objective. The Department of Defense is doing sustainability planning and climate change adaptation. We have Teslas on the road. Things are looking exciting because they're electric cars. Our friend Pope Francis has published his encyclical on the environment and climate change. He's a rock star now. It's wonderful. People are looking forward to the climate change conference in Paris in December. People are anticipating a global climate agreement. I'll be there too, probably. Could be a big time. So is that it? Then we wake up to reality. Okay? All those things are happening, but when we wake up, it's, for those who saw The Matrix, the reality situation is kind of like this, where it's true, but it's the harsh reality. If you haven't noticed, we are in the midst of the 6th mass extinction. Elizabeth Colbert's book on this is quite illuminating. We don't notice it because this happens over relatively long time scales, and a human life is pretty short, so everything outside looks fine, but in fact, the extinction rate is quite high. And it's not just the furry, attractive critters too. It's things that we really rely on for essential ecosystem services. Climate change, of course, is the big topic of the day. This century, we're likely to see a lot more of this and this. There are books coming out now that are very grim edge to them. This is by Naomi Oreskes and Eric Conway. The collapse of Western civilization, which they sort of look back from a future standpoint and say, what's going to happen in this century? Basically, possibilities of some serious ice shelf collapse, disaster imminent, yada, yada. It's grim. There's Naomi Oreskes in her office at Harvard looking really bummed about what's going to come. But her dog's okay. Books out like Last Hours of Humanity, Warming the World to Extinction, Surviving the Century, conferences called Existential Risk, Surviving the 21st Century, popular culture films. This one was the big one last year called Interstellar, which was about finding a new planet now that we've trashed this one from climate change. Basically made it uninhabitable for humans, all right? So this is in the psyche, and it's not just science fiction or fantasy. It's in large part rooted in a very scary reality. And so we know it's a unique historical moment. For the first time in human history, a particular worldview is becoming aware of its own impending doom, basically. We have an opportunity either to do nothing or to reforge our worldview to sort of really meet this head on. That's a huge challenge. No civilization has ever done that before. Are we going to be up to it? Well, we'll see. Our situation is akin to this. We are on a train, all right, our civilization, and the tracks are heading this way. The science is very clear. If you read the science, if you understand it, you know where we're headed, and that's where we're headed. This is not a pretty picture, even though it looks like a Jersey Shore, right? That we're chugging along in this direction, and everybody knows what's happening. But we have increasing numbers of people on the train because the planet's population of humans is increasing, and they all want to live like us, which is a problem. Mostly what we're doing on the train is greening it, all right? We're using organic hemp stuffed seat covers. We're double painting the windows. It's a hybrid train now. We put a green roof on the train, change the light bulbs on the train, eat organic, sustainable food on the train, etc. What's the problem?
We're still driving.
We're still on the train, exactly. We haven't left the tracks. And the tracks here...
We're staying on track, though.
Yeah, we're staying on track, which is the issue. Very good. Because in that track is our worldview. Those are the fundamental assumptions underlying everybody, basically, who lives in our society across the political spectrum, all right? Deep assumptions about, where we come from, how we're supposed to live, what the good life is, etc. All right. And for the most part, the bad news is we're accelerating toward this future, right? Because we haven't really gotten the message. So, one question: why are we so stuck on these tracks? Well, one answer you could argue is we have become entranced by what? Well, we're talking about dreams. By a vision of the future that has been implanted in our heads. All right. We are convinced we need to stay on that track because to do anything otherwise would be to deny the most important thing that we are all about, which is basically progress, right? So what is that vision that's in our heads of the future that we want to get to? And if I ask you now, what does the future have to have for it to be the future? What's the hallmark of, it's the future,
Better than today.
It's better than today, but yeah, but what terms, physically, what do you see when you imagine the future? What's it got?
Robots.
Robots, and what else?
Flying cars.
Flying cars, thank you. That's what I get
It's
it
like
every
the
time.
Jetsons.
Thank you. All right. So this is for real. All right. This is literally the image in our heads. And notice what the Jetsons is. This is the world of the future. Are there any trees? No. Is there a planet? You don't even see that because the future is one in which we escape from the world, essentially. All right. It's not about integrating ourselves into the world, which is why nobody wants to be farmers anymore, because that has to do with the old vision. All right. The new vision is about basically escaping from the planet. This is progress. You might see a little greenery down there, but you must have flying cars, all right? And it has to be high tech. That's the future, and it is in our heads, and we are building it all the time because we have imagined that, and we think this is what is coming, all right? Of course, if you see Back to the Future, what's it about? Well, In the future, it's flying cars, right? There it is. And you'll notice, just as a little aside, the future that they go to in this is actually next Wednesday at 7:28. So we are actually in the future. The flying cars aren't here yet, but they're coming, I'm sure. Okay. The actual future, people who look at this, this is a film you may be familiar with if you're old enough, called Blade Runner. Harrison Ford was in this. Of course, it had flying cars and flying police cars. The novel that this was based on by Philip K. Dick called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, I believe it was, yes. It was saying, okay, yeah, we're on this high-tech path to the future, and we think it's going to be gleaming and wonderful. But what's the reality? Yes, we'll get there. We'll have genetically modified organisms and Monsanto and everything else and flying cars. But what's the problem? It's going to be a social and ecological disaster area. All right? It's not going to be a world you want to live in. You'll have all your high-tech stuff because you insist on it. All right? But it's going to be dark, nightmarish. All right? So yeah, that's the future that we're most likely headed toward. All right? So the question is, echoing what we heard in the front row a little bit ago, how can we get off track? Basically, we need a new dream. We need a new vision to replace the one that we now know is dysfunctional, even though we're addicted to it. All right? What's that new dream going to be? Well, one way to do that is to tell a new story. To tell a new story of how we got here and where we're going to go. All right? So what I'm going to ask you, this is a useful thought experiment. What is the story people will tell 200 years from now about how we managed to get off that track and begin creating a genuinely sustainable future? What will this story include? Will it be some invention or what? Well, you could argue that it might be a story of telling a new story, coming up with a new vision, a new dream. So what's the story of how this happened? So we abandoned that, hospiced it, if you wish, and went in another direction. It would have to be desirable. So let me try to tell a story. Once upon a time, there was a man named Liberty Hyde Bailey, born in 1858, died in 1956. For quite a while was the Dean of the College of Agriculture at Cornell University from 1903 to 1913. He was the chair of Teddy Roosevelt's Country Life Commission, which looked into the circumstances of country life. What folks at Del Valle College, University, you should know, basically founded the field of horticulture. All right, if you look, Hortus, the books, he's the guy who did that. He was a botanist primarily, but then invented horticulture. Significantly, he was the author of this book, which was published 100 years ago this year. All right, it's called The Holy Earth. There's a new edition out with a foreword by Wendell Berry, subtitled here, The Birth of a New Land Ethic. Very significant work because it was the sort of precursor of ideas presented in Aldo Leopold's Land Ethic. All right, again, it came out in 1915. Very early stuff. Those of us, such as me, this is what I sort of did my doctoral research on a number of years ago, have been trying to keep these ideas alive because we think being able to tell the story of what happened in the early 20th century, what the possibilities and opportunities were then, is really important to keep alive when we have to come back and start retelling our story about how we got where we are and where we're going to go. So yes, there has been a small but devoted audience of people like this. So you may never have heard of Liberty Hyde Bailey or the Holy Earth, but we're going to try to get you to participate. In this book, you'll see phrases, just to give you a sampling, like mothership of the earth, all right? He uses the term permanent agriculture. Today we use the term sustainable agriculture. Permanent is perhaps better. And he comes up with this idea that the living creation is not exclusively man-centered. It is biocentric. All right? 1915, 100 years ago. All right? I will also tell you that anything that you find in Laudato Si, the Pope's encyclical, you can find also stated in a little more humbler language, perhaps, in the Holy Earth from 100 years ago. Basically, what they're both doing is reinterpreting primarily the sort of biblical commandment for humans to have dominion over the planet. All right? Well, Bailey says, well, what does that mean exactly? To have dominion over it? Doesn't it mean ours? And so, what they come out with here was, Bailey, I would argue, has for the first time a truly planetary perspective. Right? Prior to that, people talked about nature and everything, but Bailey comes out with a truly planetary ethic, planetary perspective. And in this book, he has a prophecy, and he calls it the new hold. Right? This is what we were working to. This is his term for the new dream, the new vision that we should be looking toward. All right? And the new hold has two motivations. The first one is intellectual, an intellectual motivation, and that is evolution. All right, we'll come into that in a second. The second one is destruction, based on what he was observing at his time. All right, so let's look into these. Evolution, you've got Origin of Species, which came out, this version in 1859. Here's two guys, Charles Darwin on the left, Asa Gray on the right, hipsters who had the same stylist. Asa Gray was teaching at Harvard University. Liberty Hyde Bailey studied at Harvard with Asa Gray, who was Charles Darwin's great American defender. At this time, late 1800s, early 1900s, evolutionary thought was the thing going on in social circles, scientific circles, because it was really calling into question fundamental ideas such as, how do we fit into the world? Where did we come from? What should we be doing? All those kinds of big issues. And so, in 1905, Bailey writes in his book, The Outlook to Nature, the evolution philosophies have changed our point of view not only toward what we call nature, but toward all problems of life and destiny. Right? Because we really begin to recalibrate how we fit into the world. And then in The Holy Earth in 1950, he says, we are parts in a living, sensitive creation. The theme of evolution has overturned our attitude toward this creation. Living creation is not exclusively man-centered, it is biocentric. We have genetic relation with all living things, and our aristocracy is the aristocracy of nature. We can claim no gross superiority, no isolated self-importance. In creation, not man is the norm. Right? And we have still not assimilated this idea into our thinking, because we assume that everything is for us. In Harrisburg, we have the Department of Environmental Protection. We have Department of Natural Resources. Whose resources are those? Humans. Right? It all belongs to us. It's all about humans. Still there. That idea is, as perhaps as some have called it, the most dangerous idea in the world. That humans are somehow other than and separate from the rest of the world, the rest of the community of life. And Bailey said evolution proves it. We're not. Because we are literally connected to everything else on the planet. All right? But we still haven't really got that. So that was sort of the intellectual foundation of his vision. The second was the hazard of destruction. Even in the early 1900s, you can see this. If you looked around, we had extinctions of passenger pigeons and bison and everything else. And if you were keen, you sensed where this story was going, all right? And Bailey said, and this is all the more true today, today we are moved by impulses of trade, and we find ourselves plunged into a war of commercial frenzy. And it has behind it vaster resources and more command of natural forces. So is it the most ferocious and wasteful that the race has experienced, exceeding in its havoc the cataclysms of earthquake and volcano. And now we can take out rainforests like that, and we can, basically, humans are this.
And he said this 100 years ago.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is what he was sensing. It was a prophetic vision, all right? He sort of sensed what was going on around. So the new hold, then. The years pass and they grow, and we see more clearly, we are to take a new hold, right? What is that new hold going to be? Well, I hasten to say that I'm not thinking of any back-to-the-farm movement to bring about the results necessarily that the population of farmers will give us. So he's not talking about sort of going back to the past and getting down on our hands and knees and eating berries and just kind of doing the groovy thing. He's talking about a new future that understands that, yes, we're still going to progress in some sense, but it's not going to be in the way that we understand that now. All right? In The Seven Stars in 1923, this was his background books. He says, after we have gratified ourselves in the exploitation of the earth, the race will be prepared to welcome another order. Assuredly, we are not going back to the ancient, etc., etc., etc. So basically, he says we should be ready for something really exciting and different. All right? This is the prophecy. So, what's the catalyst? Now we get to the sort of the theme here. What's going to catalyze a new hold? Well, one possibility is nature study. And nature study is the oldest environmental ed sort of operation in the United States. Liberty Hyde Bailey's Nature Study Philosophy. His book came out in 1903, The Nature Study Idea. He became the first president of the American Nature Study Society in 1908. So the American Nature Study Society was the precursor of organizations like the North American Association for Environmental Education, etc. All right? And Liberty Hyde Bailey was the first president. I'm going to spare you some of the details, but the idea here is it's rooted in an idea that it was about something more than just science education. All right? It was about putting people into contact. Because the idea was, at this time in history, there was a Great Depression, and people were leaving the countryside and heading to cities. And the thought was, why are people leaving the countryside? Because all the stuff that appealed to people based on the vision of the future was in urban areas. There was nothing that was attractive, supposedly, in rural areas, except nature, because people weren't appreciating that in comparison to what the city offered. And so one way perhaps to keep people on the land was to instruct them in the things that you had in abundance, which was the natural world. If we could appreciate that, people would stay there. All right, that was the idea, you know, misguided or not. So the main thesis of nature study is that nature study teaching is one thing, and that science teaching for science sake is another. So it has a different purpose. Because nowadays, if you talk about environmental education, people go to what? Science education. It's basically science, nothing more than that. All right? Bailey had a different idea. He said nature study is seeing what one looks at and drawing proper conclusions, and thereby the learner comes into personal relation and sympathy with the object. It'd be better if it were called nature sympathy. So it's about sympathy with our natural environment, basically. All right? We're made of water. What do we eat? We eat nature. It's what we're made of. How do we have some sympathetic relation with the community of life that's around us? All right? That's kind of what it was about, to sort of live in a balanced relationship. And it was about happiness. You know, if one is to be happy, you must be happy with common things. Right? And you do that by learning to appreciate the things that are all around us. Right? I'm going to try to skip some of this, but basically what happened is nature study by 1947 had pretty much disappeared. It was replaced by elementary science education. Okay? And so what I'm saying here is that early in the 20th century, in the next 20th century, yes, you had a vision of nature study which was much more expansive, which was really about putting people into sympathy with the natural world, rooted in this idea that we are part of nature, which came out of evolution philosophies. But by the middle of the 20th century, we had been in the grips of this other vision. And people didn't want to talk about being in sympathy with the natural world. They wanted to conquer the natural world. They wanted to subdue the natural world so that we could build this vision of a gleaming Jetson civilization in the sky. All right? So who wanted to learn about nature? Why should we bother with that? All right? Because in our vision, we don't even see nature. Okay? And so what we care about then is STEM. Forgive me if it steps on toes. And STEM is all the rage now. Why? Because it's all about engineering. All right? It may or may not have anything to do with the natural world. And I will say as an aside, I would argue that if we're going to do STEM stuff, it ought to be rooted in something like biomimicry. That the solutions for our problems in terms of living sustainably come from the natural world. That's where it is. I mean, you know, the spiders make silk at room temperature. It's biodegradable. They are the true engineers. But young people today studying the natural world don't know anything about, studying science and engineering, know almost nothing about the natural world. And as a result, they are missing the real genius, because everything that's alive today solves some problem. And if it didn't solve it, it would be extinct. Right? And so that's the source of our innovation. Right? But we tend to think only humans have intelligence. That's the hubris that we're operating from. So yes, so what happened? Well, why did Bailey's vision not come to fruition? Well, the intellectual motivation alone has been and remains insufficient to overcome the attraction and creative energy of industrial civilization's techno-utopian vision. Right? Yes, we know that we're part of nature, but who gives a shit? What really matters is...
Everyone does, right?
Yeah.
Every day.
Most people do not, and you're absolutely spot on. I see this in my company of 45 environmental scientists and engineers. I believe 5 are comfortable going into the woods by themselves. That's shocking to me.
Yeah. So, there we go. So the other piece, the habit of destruction, you could argue, has not been severe enough to cause a rethinking of fundamental worldview creative questions. But we are on the cusp of this. Okay? What will cause us to rethink that civilizational vision on that track? Well, catastrophe. And even then it may not be enough because we're so wedded to that vision of the future. And so right now, which you could argue, if you're just paying attention to the science, we are on the cusp of catastrophe. And if you're a creature other than a North American human, these are not good times for you. So for the rest of the world, in many cases, this is the time that we should be rethinking our civilizational vision. But it's really not happening. So what Bailey basically offered, and some others, in the early 20th century, was a path that was not taken. All right? Bailey went that way, at least in his thinking, and we, in our Hummer, and we said, we're going that way. All right? Now that other path is still open, and we can bushwhack our way there and have a different vision of the future. But the other one, it's so attractive, it's so appealing, and it's so in our heads. And this is essential. Václav Havel, one of my favorite writers, he says, the only real hope of people today is probably a renewal of our certainty that we're rooted in the earth, and at the same time, the cosmos, a really big perspective. So this is about kind of gaining a real sense of our place, not only on the planet, but in the universe, of course. We can go on with some fun stuff if you want. But yes, absolutely, history becomes more and more a race between education and catastrophe. So the education work that we do is essential. And it's got to be more than just sort of recognizing the names of things, but it's got to start somewhere. But just to give you some, just to sort of blow your minds, in terms of visions of the future, in 1910, this is the way they thought we were going to be educating in the year 2000. And now, in the year 2000, right? By stuffing information. Are these people going to be prepared to create a new world? Not really, all right? In 1958, this was the vision of education. Again, is it outside? Absolutely not. In 1963, we've got the Jetsons. Here's their vision of education. Same old, still inside, looking at stuff. This is it. They have a little greenery over there, maybe. Or maybe that's the compost pile, I'm not sure. Here's the high school. No land in sight, no planet in sight. Homework helper, all inside, all gizmos. Automated school mark from 1964-65. Right? Is that really what we need? There's more of it. 1982, now we have Atari in on it. Right? Indoors, this is education of the future. Now we have this, 2015. At least kids are at tables, but the idea is now, if we just stick a laptop in front of everybody, it's really good education. Is it true? I will tell you for a fact it's not. If you have a lousy teacher with lots of high-tech tools, what do you got? A lousy teacher with lots of high-tech tools. If you have an excellent teacher who goes outside with kids, what do you got? An excellent teacher.
An experience.
An experience, exactly. Not an extinction experience. So is this the future? We just sort of make everything, put little kids doing crazy stuff in there? So the idea here is we have a choice. We can prepare for the future, which is already given, determined in our head. We can adapt to the future, which is already given, or we can imagine the future and create it. Right? The latter requires young people who are actively thinking about possibilities, not probabilities. Not probability of catastrophe, but possibilities. What if we did this? Right? Which means we need the arts, we need creativity, we need people who can really think outside the box in a real way. Right? So, the classroom of the future, hopefully it's not like that. Technology, here's my favorite quote. The knack of so arranging the world that we don't have to experience it. Right? The extinction experience, all right? So, could this be the classroom of the future? We hope so. Well, kids will be learning from the natural world how to solve our big problems. The best solar collectors on the planet are where? In leaves.
In
Plants, exactly. That's the true designers, all right? So we have to learn how they do it. These are actually students from Radnor Middle School's watershed program. And what do? They spend most of their time learning about their watershed. Lots of time outside. It's an incredible model for the future. So there they are, place-based watershed education. So anyway, we'll do a little quiz. Yeah, here, I'll give you a quiz. We live in a culture of distraction, as you know. Right? This is one of the challenges of waking up. As soon as we pop out of the womb, we're being educated to a vision of the future that isn't simply high-tech, but it's also one rooted in the commercial culture, all right? Being branded, and just to sort of prove this. We can do a little logo quiz, all right? I do this with students all the time, and we can do this for hours, people get it. So what's this?
Mercedes.
Good.
Chevy.
Good.
Volkswagen.
Yeah, that was
Diesel
trouble.
engine.
Yeah.
Diesel engines on the
Yeah,
loose.
this one's I'm gonna have to remove that.
Nike.
Thank you, good,
McDonald's.
good,
Toyota.
good. Now, how did you learn these things? You must have studied them in school, right?
Oh, yeah.
No. So this stuff is ambient in the culture. This indicates, this is the tip of the iceberg of what people know, because the real educator is mother culture. And mother culture is all about commercialism and consumerism and high-tech worship, right? That's what we learn whether you go to school or not. You will come out of this society learning those things, all right? You get that. And you can resist if you like, but most of you get squashed if you resist, all right? Then there's this other stuff that's around us all the time, too, that for the most part, and I do this all the time with young people, you're going to do a better job, I'm sure, have no idea what these things are.
That's
So
a bird.
that's what I say, bird! Good, right? Yeah, black cap chickadee, thank you. By the way, these are common around here, we'll see them. Yeah, this one has a racy name that talks about. This one is actually the red-bellied woodpecker, has a, and the goldfinch, right? And then we do the Liriodendron tulipifera, very nice. And these have stories too. You know, the tulip poplar was used by native peoples for dugout canoes because it had a very straight trunk, You dig it out, makes the canoes. Great. People and I say, no, it's not marijuana.
Look where
It's
they are.
sweet gum, which original chewing gum comes from. There's the Moco. There's people, hockey players get that one. This is the sassafras, has different kinds of leaves. This is the ancient ginkgo. So, bottom line, will we do what is needed to save soil, species, people, and ecosystems that we do not know anything about? So love's got a lot to do with it. Absolutely. And if you don't know what this is, if it disappears, will anybody notice or care? Absolutely not. Right? So, that's what we got. Thank you very much.